Welcome back. You know, I was reading this book here and it was reminding me of another tale. It was reminding me of a time where I got a phone call from a friend and a group of people had gathered and we had been given access to the Jane Addams Tuberculosis Hospital in New York. It was a very quiet, hush-hush thing. Very limited people had access or entry to that location, and most would actually be arrested if they were found on the property. Luckily, we had authorities with us, guiding us part of the way. But there were other things along the way that had its eyes on us. Jane Addams Memorial Hospital, or later known as Jane Addams Tuberculosis Hospital, actually opened in 1912. A man by the name of James Noble Adam, the Buffalo mayor at the time, had seen the need for medical treatment facilities to handle such cases. And like a lot of the country at the time, a big fan of the fresh air and sunlight therapy for tuberculosis. So outside of the building had many of balconies that they would wheel the patients out to get said treatment. Another thing about the building was when Mr. Adam had decided to commission the project, he also decided to go for a very beautiful, ornate piece. The cafeteria was used more frequently than anywhere else in the building, of course, for all meals for all patients. And what he did was he determined to help let more light and beautiful light into that cafeteria. He actually had the dome moved. The dome was moved from the Temple of Music in Buffalo that was part of the Pan American exhibit in 1901. This is the same dome that President McKinley was shot under. The one time I was at the Jane Addams Tuberculosis Hospital, it was by invite. We were escorted by authorities throughout the location. They were looking for trespassers and anything interesting that might happen. And we were able to capture amazing photographs of the inside and outside of this building. recall going into the building, we were back by a laundry chute area that had wash tubs and big washers, dryers. It was the laundry facility for the facility, if you will. And we went through, there were many tunnels through this place. There were probably 2 to 3 buildings that we could manage to access between the outside of the grounds and the tunnels through the grounds that went to the exterior buildings. The auditorium was absolutely crazy. That was probably the craziest part. What happens is, as you walk into the front of the building, because we were able to do so, you're greeted with the sign that says J.N. Adams Memorial Hospital, and then you have a staircase and left, right, or straight to the staircase, basically. If you were to take the left, you would head down a hallway that would then lead you to the auditorium, which was also the gymnasium. Think like a school gymnasium type that does the crossover. It doubles as the auditorium. When we walked in, all that was sitting there was basically a battered, torn down stage. And there was one wheelchair sitting in the middle of the floor. A lot of the stuff that was left behind when the building closed in 1993 was still there at this point when I had been there. From my understanding, since it's been graffitied, torn down even further, and just it's in shambles and a wreck. But when I was there, it was rough when I was there too. We went to the second floor. On the second floor, when you walked, you had to be careful where you stepped, because some spots were nice and sturdy and some you could feel your foot go right through. And imagine, in this facility, it was a hospital facility, so it's not like in a home where if you step through, you fall, and you fall maybe 8 feet. As we traveled throughout the building, we did get to see a lot of very interesting things. We found some paperwork, a lot of paperwork that had been left behind. You got to figure, this building, basically what had happened was it was a battle between the county and the city, from my understanding, because the city of Buffalo is the one who owned the property back with Mr. Adam. And it became a battle between who owns it, who can control it, who even mows the grass at this point. Therefore, it's pretty much just been shut and locked and left to fall to pieces. It determined it was too expensive to completely just demolish, but yet also too expensive to do anything with the property. Like I said, the second floor, if you step on the wrong spot, you could go right through it. I did not spend much time on the second floor, being a larger man than I am. The first time I put my foot down and I started to sink, I said, okay, guys, well, let me know how this goes, and holler if you need me. I'll be downstairs. The building opened in 1912 and remained a medical and tuberculosis facility into about 1960. At that point, the focus had moved off of the nation so much in regards to tuberculosis. We had found ways to help work with it, to help treat patients that we could at that time. Medical advancements had moved along, and we were no longer focused on tuberculosis. We were focused more on the mental health side of things. And in that vein, they then decided to turn this location into a mental health facility and hospital for those dealing with those forms of issues. Now, mind you, back in that time frame, women were still being considered hysterical for something that medically happened about every 30 days. And not saying that everybody was misplaced by being in this mental facility, but it was definitely questionable at the time. And some of the treatments were even more so questionable. As we walked through the basement of this location and this hospital, we were walking through, we noticed things like beds that had straps on them. Now, the curious thing about this was the bed was located and it was attached to the floor, yet if you were to put a person on it and strap them to it, it would do one thing and one thing only, and that would rise up to make the person stand vertically. Or I suppose you could strap them in upside down, depending on which way they would lay on the bed. But either way, this was something that was seen as a medically necessary tool in this facility. We also located large bathtubs that were almost form-fitting that you would sit in. Now, of course, there's always times and situations where there's claims of abuse that have taken on. Some of the claims of this location were things like people being put into those types of tubs and then being forgotten, or the people who were left and considered forgotten out on the balconies and may sit there for a day or two. And it's very unfortunate and it's heartbreaking to hear this. I personally was invited along for the paranormal aspect. There's always been rumors and little whispers that Jane Addams is haunted, Jane Addams is haunted. But nobody could really get into there, and the people who did were quickly escorted out of there by the authorities, as it is trespassing, it is private property, and you are not even allowed to be on the private road that leads to the facility without proper permission. So being able to get into this place was unheard of. And when I got the call to go, I jumped on it. I was basically told to stick with everybody else, as long as we stayed in groups in communication with each other, and make sure that, avoid any dangerous areas, things like that. But we were given the areas that we were allowed to go and inspect, and if we wanted to take a couple minutes with our equipment, we were welcome to do so. I had mentioned earlier about the auditorium, gymnasium. That was one place we were really drawn to. There were about 4 of us in total, and we went into the area full of hope of something happening, of course, as we do when we try to have this type of communication, do the ghost hunt thing. But when we went in and actually did this, we set up equipment around, we set different things down, like a ball, for instance, to see if it would roll. It's a gymnasium, right? We were sitting there and we're asking questions, and it sounded to all of us collectively like somebody was walking down the hall that leads to this room. We were on the exterior of a building all around except for the hallway that leads to the rest of the building. So therefore, unless you're outside trying to come in, which wasn't happening, the only way to get into the room was to come down the hall. So we're waiting there and we're listening to footsteps come down the hall, and they're getting closer, and we're all making sure, and we're like, okay, it's the other group coming to join us or check that area. As soon as we see each other, everything will be fine. As we waited, one of us yelled, hey, we're in here, who's down there? And we waited, and it stayed silent. And then we started to hear the footsteps coming, and it sounded like a couple more footsteps. It sounded like it was getting louder and like more of them were coming. And we said, hey, guys. We named off a couple of them, trying to get their attention. No answer. Now, the craziest part about it is, as we sat there, at one point, we look over and we noticed we're listening to the footsteps in the hall. And we noticed through the window in the side of our room there that there's flashlights in the hall on the other side of the building, which would lead over towards the cafeteria and the dining room. It took us a moment to stop and think, and if there's only 2 groups and one of us are in here and the other group is over there with flashlights, clearly, who's coming down the hall? So we waited and we heard the footsteps get louder, and we started to hear chatter, and we started to hear talking, and we're listening. We couldn't make out what they were saying, but it sounded like a group of people were coming to join us. And one of the guys slowly walked up towards the door, and he opened it. There was nothing. Nobody was there. No footsteps. No chatter. Everything had fallen silent. And he, just baffled, turned and looked at us, and we hoped one of us caught it on our voice recorders or our equipment. And we proceeded on. We walked over. We did find the other crew that was in the dining room area, which is where we saw the flashlights. We had asked if anybody had strayed, if maybe somebody knew we were over there and tried to work their way over. What happened? Nothing. They had been focused in the area that they were focused on. We were in the area we were in. And there was nobody from our group in between. And because of the purpose and size of our group, we were sure there was nobody else in the building alive. I didn't get to spend a lot of time at Jane Addams. The time I did spend was a great experience. I got to see and witness a lot. With a lot of places, the stories of being haunted or not haunted, you know, they come from one experience. One guy went there one time, or one group went there one time. And in this case, I can say, is it haunted? In my belief, Jane Addams is haunted. Is it from the patients of the tuberculosis era? Is it from the mental health patients? Who knows? We didn't get time to explore into that. But what we did see was we got to witness and visually see a building that, from anything I've seen in the past 15 years since I've been there, has just further deteriorated. Any videos, any clips, any photos you find nowadays, half of the stuff that I was able and allowed to walk through and experience doesn't even exist anymore, or isn't even accessible anymore. And that's really sad. I had mentioned earlier that one of the reasons that they had kind of strayed away from the mental health facility there in Perrysburg, New York at the Jane Addams Hospital was because of the buildings and the hospitals that they were building in Buffalo. Now, Buffalo has its own mental health facility, and its current one is stationed right next to what they call the Richardson Complex, which definitely tried some very experimental treatment theories. And that itself has its own very dark history. But that's another story for another time.